It's an historic day where we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. We also are celebrating the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th president. Same time, Israel is welcoming home 3 hostages in the first stage of a ceasefire in Gaza.
We have coverage from our bureaus in Jerusalem and Washington, D.C., beginning in Israel, where they're celebrating the release of the hostages with a wary eye on what some see as a questionable deal. Julie Stahl reports.
Joy and tears surrounded the 3 women, Emily Damari, Doron Steinbrecher, and Romi Gonen, as they returned to Israel and the embrace of family and friends. As the 3 arrived at the Sheba Medical Center outside Tel Aviv, the crowd went wild. Friends were beside themselves with joy.
Our hearts are bursting, exploding. She looks just like she did when she left, as special and beautiful as she is.
Inside, the medical professionals took over.
I'm happy to report that they are in stable condition that allows us and them to focus on what is the most important thing for now, is reuniting with their families.
The Israeli military's chief spokesman weighed in after the women's release.
We cannot imagine the horrors these 3 young women have endured in 50 months of Hamas captivity.
Until the last moment in Gaza, the 3 hostages were terrorized, with Hamas gunmen and a mob of Gazan civilians surrounding their convoy and screaming at them. Hamas gave them gift bags with certificates of release, a map of Gaza, and photos of their time in captivity. Then the women were handed over to the Red Cross, which transported them into the hands of Israeli forces. As soon as the ceasefire took place, scores of armed Hamas fighters appeared from their hiding places and quickly took control again in the streets of Gaza. They're declaring they've won a mighty victory over Israel. This image of a conquering Hamas terrorist with his foot on the back of kneeling Benjamin Netanyahu is making the rounds in Arab media. The head of Hamas's military wing put out a video calling for Palestinians in the so-called West Bank to escalate their attacks on Israel. Hagari says the IDF is ready to face any threat.
In this agreement, there are risks and there are challenges. We know how to come back and fight and stand up for all the goals of the war.
Shortly after Hamas freed the 3 women hostages, Israel began releasing 90 Palestinian prisoners, the first of more than 1,000 to be released, some of them terrorists who murdered Jews in well-known attacks, one of the most frightening aspects for Israelis. As the deal goes forward, Hamas is supposed to release 30 more prisoners in the coming weeks in exchange for hundreds more terrorists. Negotiations are supposed to continue until all hostages are released and a permanent ceasefire is in place. With the Trump administration taking over today, Senator Lindsey Graham insists Hamas' declaration of victory will be short-lived.
This war will never end with Hamas in charge of Gaza, politically or militarily. Their days are numbered.
Graham also suggests that the new administration gives support to Israel in dealing with an even larger threat, an Iran that could soon be armed with nuclear bombs.
I am hoping there will be an effort by Israel to decimate the Iran nuclear program supported by the United States, and if we don't do that, it will be a historical mistake.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now. And Chris, I've just got to observe, it looked like Hamas was well funded. I mean, those were brand new uniforms. They had plenty of weapons. Nobody looked like they were starving. What about all these reports of just the horror in Gaza? It just didn't seem to be reflected in that visual.
Yeah, for the last 15 months, a lot of people have been saying there's a genocide, and now they're declaring victory. And some people are saying, well, which is it? Is it genocide or victory? And obviously, they're getting some funding. And part of that funding, people are saying, Gordon, comes from the humanitarian aid that has been coming in, that actually Hamas steals perhaps up to 40% or more of that humanitarian aid to fund what they're doing. And now they're above ground, no longer in the tunnels, and no longer without uniforms. Now they're with uniforms, and they typically do that only when there's a ceasefire. But I would say, Gordon, coming back, and I've been in the States for a few weeks, coming back here to Israel and just sensing the mood here in the atmosphere, So many Israelis are really reeling. They're conflicted about what's going on. The hostages for 15 months have been an open wound on Israeli society. Israel's a big family. They're euphoric about the release of Doron, Romi, and Emily. Tears, celebrations. And yet, on the other hand, there's a real concern that the released prisoners, there's been 90 so far, and they're planning to be up to 1,700. So there's a big discussion in Israel right now about the deal. Earlier, I talked to a rabbi and explained to me that everyone in Jewish life is pro-life. Life is their highest value. Everyone's jubilant for Doron, Emily, and Romi. But when is the price of one hostage more than you should pay? When does it cost even more lives? And when does it incentivize your enemy to kidnap more? And that's the anguish that Israelis are facing right now and have faced for 15 months. It's excruciating. And Gordon, it's not theoretical. It's been chronicled. In 2011, more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners were released for just one IDF soldiers. And those terrorists, they killed over 190 Israelis, including Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, who eventually masterminded October 7th.
Well, I guess it's a difference in ideology. Here in the United States, we like to pride ourselves that we never negotiate with terrorists. Unfortunately, that can get a little squishy sometimes. We don't necessarily have such a hard line with it. But in Israel, they view that if you save one life, it's as if you've saved the entire world. And so they don't look at it as just that one life, but the generations that would follow. And so it's a weighing, and it seems like it's creating some political division within the current government, and some factions are leaving. Are we looking at I guess, a mid-war election? Is Netanyahu's government at risk now?
It's very much at risk right now, Gordon, and perhaps the greatest risk so far, even under the Biden administration. Ben Gvir, he's one of the coalition members. He's resigned and he's left the coalition. He calls the deal a capitulation to terror. He's going to support the government from the outside. That means that when legislation comes out, he'll vote with the coalition. But it really leaves Netanyahu with a very slim majority. A few weeks ago, Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar, his party, the New Hope, came in, and that keeps that slim majority. But on the other hand, a man named Bezalel Smotrich, he's the finance minister. He's from the religious Zionist party. He says he's going to pull out of the government if after phase one, they don't go back to fighting Hamas. And that would, Netanyahu then would lose his majority, may collapse the government. So Netanyahu really right now, he's balancing appeasing the Trump administration, satisfying those who want to release the hostages at any cost, and also staying in power. And that's why he, as well as many leaders here, really need prayer right now.
Well, we certainly are praying for Israel and praying for the entire situation. We have a new president being sworn in today, and you look at the situation in Gaza, and it's pretty clear to me in the ceasefire, Hamas is now asserting control. They're now the police force, if you will, of Gaza, and they're going to enforce their domination of government there. So what is the incoming Trump administration going to do with that?
Well, the incoming Trump administration probably is the most pro-Israel foreign policy team in history. You have Marco Rubio, the designated Secretary of State, at his confirmation hearing. He said, how can any nation coexist side by side with a group of savages like Hamas? Pete Hegseth, perhaps the next Secretary of Defense, he said, I support killing every last member of Hamas. Mike Waltz, he's the incoming National Security Advisor. On CBS Face of the Nation, he said Hamas will never govern Gaza. That's completely unacceptable. And he added that he wants Israelis to hear me loud and clear. If Hamas reneges on the deal, we will support Israel in doing what it has to do. And then you have incoming ambassador to Israel, Governor Mike Huckabee, who's been a strong supporter of Israel for many decades. The question over here, some people are asking, Gordon, is what about Steve Witkoff? He's the wild card for some people. He's the Middle East envoy. And many here in Israel, and I just talked to a reporter earlier today about this, about his connections to Qatar. The Qatar Investment Authority Sovereign Wealth Fund purchased his hotel, the Park Lane Hotel in New York City, for $623 million from his real estate company. Some question over here whether those financial dealings, can he be an honest broker, especially when Qatar, for decades, Gordon, has been the chief sponsor of Hamas. And so some wonder and hope and pray there is something to this deal that really isn't known publicly. And one people are saying, does this mean the U.S. is going to help destroy Iran's nuclear program as one of perhaps the unknown deals in this deal? But right now, we don't know. And that's why some people are asking for 42 days of prayer for the next 42 days, which is the first phase of this deal.
Well, we certainly need to be in prayer, but the reports I'm hearing is that the incoming Trump administration, and whether it was through the envoy or through other channels, put pressure on Netanyahu to come to this deal. So what's involved in that pressure? But it seems in the aftermath, today on the ground in Gaza, on the first day of the ceasefire, Hamas is clearly in control of Gaza and clearly in power. And so, what is the Trump administration going to do with that? Because that's the outcome of the ceasefire. Well, we'll certainly be in prayer. Chris, thanks so much for joining with us, and thanks for being on the Watchman on the Wall. We'll be hearing a lot from you as this 42 days continues. And hopefully, at the end of it, there'll be a peace that lasts.